Hello everyone, welcome. Our weekly scheduled program. We will meditate together first, give people a chance to ask questions, give people a chance to trickle in. If you have questions, you can post them in the chat. If you don't have any questions, just close your eyes and we'll meditate together, or you can stand up and do walking meditation. Or just sit and close your eyes and watch the stomach and pay attention to the four satipatthana, Kaya, Vedana, Chitta, Dhamma. So we'll just meditate together for maybe 15 minutes, after which we will have a Q&A session. So feel free to start posting questions in the chat. All right, thank you. It's always best to start with a little preparation, get ourselves in a mindful frame of mind. Also gives us a chance to collect questions. So now we'll begin with the Q&A portion. Anything that's not a question will be deleted from chat. So if you don't have a question, you can just close your eyes and keep on keeping on.
Thank you, Bante. We do have questions. In walking meditation, can we note a distraction right away? Or should we always note stopping and standing before noting the distraction? Is concentration more encouraged than in sitting meditation?
So in walking meditation, if it's not a major distraction, if it's a minor distraction, you can ignore it and just bring your mind back to the foot. If you're going to note something, you have to stop walking first, put your feet together and note it distinctly from actual walking. Don't try and keep walking and note something else.
How much should I let go of control when meditating? Currently, I very gently rest my attention on the belly and allow and notice when it is moved to the next object. Is this okay?
I don't think you need to be so so determined about it. You don't have to gently or not gently rest your attention. Just put your mind on your stomach when you're aware of the rising. Say rising. When you're aware of the falling, say falling. It's not so much about letting go of control. You have to notice when you're wanting to control. So there'll be a desire or there'll be a tension in the body, and you have to note those. I wouldn't worry too much about how much control or how little control. If you're trying to control, you have to understand that's not right practice. So don't think that there's some part of the practice that involves controlling. Just note when you feel the desire to control and the tension that comes from wanting to control or not being able to control.
There are some times during the day when I have 15 spare minutes I want to use to meditate. Should I do walking 15 minutes, sitting 15 minutes, or walking 7 minutes 30 seconds and sitting 7 minutes 30 seconds?
Any of those is fine. 15 minutes isn't a lot, so it's not going to drastically change your practice if you do any one of those. You do well to try and balance throughout the day. You're walking and you're sitting, but the minimum is something like 10 minutes walking, 10 minutes sitting. Anything less than that, and it's fine. Do whatever you think you're able. Sometimes you've been walking a lot, so you want to do a little extra sitting. Sometimes you've been sitting a lot, so you want to do an extra walking. That's fine for things like 15 minutes. But if you're going to do longer sessions, 30 minutes total or an hour total, it's good if you balance them.
When meditating and noting, I seem to slip away. That's not to say I stop noting or I'm unconscious. I know I've kept noting, but it's like being elsewhere or at one with things. What is this?
Well, you're being pretty vague there. which doesn't mean I can't answer, but the answer would be something like try to be a little more specific with yourself as to the experience. I mean, the words you're using are not actually, they aren't actually describing an experience, and they don't indicate an actual awareness of what you're experiencing or mindfulness of what you're experiencing. So a key aspect of mindfulness is being able to identify what it is that you're experiencing. So saying it's like this or it's like that, which the things you're saying it's like are nothing to do with experience. Most likely it's some kind of feeling. So you might just note feeling, but you should also note liking or disliking, and you should note any thoughts you might have about it. What it seems like isn't that useful either. You have to pinpoint what it actually is, and from the sounds of it, it's probably a feeling of sorts. If it's just an awareness, you can say something like knowing that this is happening as it's happening. You don't have to figure out what it means or what it is, what's behind it, nothing like that. Just try and note the experience of it.
Is it correct to note the 4 elements during walking meditation, or should we always stick with stepping right, stepping left, standing, stopping, and turning?
So that is noting the 4 elements. When you note stepping right, stepping left, what you're noting is the experience of the 4 elements. We just give it names like that, like lifting and placing and so on. Stepping right and stepping left are pretty basic. They're for a newcomer. We don't generally stick with that. So if you're interested in a more actual experience-based advanced practice, I would encourage you to try and do the at-home course to give you some more some more detailed practices to go over. But that is the 4 elements. I mean, if you're just to note something like earth, or air, that's not recommended, because that's kind of those are just names of the elements. The actual experience is something like pressure, hardness, softness, heat, cold, and so on. And you could note those, but when the foot is moving, it's much more simple to just say lifting, placing, or something like. I mean, when we start off, if you haven't done the at-home course, you just start with stepping right, stepping left, and that's enough. I mean, read the Satipatthana Sutta. The Buddha said, when you walk, you say, "I'm walking." You don't say, "This is the air element," or "This is the fire element," or so on, because that experience of walking is the elements. That's what you're being mindful of.
In one of your old videos, I think you said we should focus on one point of the stomach whilst noting rising and falling. Should we focus on a specific point or in the whole sensation?
The whole sensation. There's no specific point. I mean, it's unpredictable, so it might be small sometimes, big sometimes, but generally it's just a feeling of tension. It's whatever the body presents. You can't control what you're going to experience.
I have this unusual fear of evil spirits during meditation, which is not present otherwise. Only during meditation it comes up. Can these beings possess my body in meditation?
So it's not your body, and the beings don't exist. If you dwell in that kind of realm, then the answer is yes. Apparently, beings can possess your body, but none of those things are real. And so it's not actually a danger for someone who is mindful, because your experience is separate from any kind of possession or takeover. I will say that it's incredibly rare for this to happen. It apparently does happen. Recently, someone at one of the funerals I went to said that their deceased relative possessed one of the children's bodies just to tell them something. So, I mean, it's not, I guess, exceedingly rare, but it's pretty rare. It doesn't really happen for very long. Sometimes it's this kind of thing, someone wants to tell them something. there can be cases of malevolent spirits. It's not that prevalent, and it's much more common for people to be afraid of such things and be misled by their own experiences. We were talking recently about schizophrenia, and it sounds like schizophrenia might be a lot of different things, just meaning that the mind can produce experiences independent of any external phenomena. Sometimes it's very hard to distinguish, and reasonably so, because in reality there is no difference. If your mind comes up with something independent of any outside influence, or someone plants a thought in your mind, the experience is exactly the same, right? Well, I mean, yeah, it should be indistinguishable, because the experience is just an experience of thinking. Maybe you hear a sound, hearing, maybe you see something, seeing, but the experience itself is independent of the source. So if something appears to be possessing you, the reality is still going to be experiences of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, feeling, thinking, exactly as if someone wasn't possessing you. And as a result, it's actually inconsequential, even though it seems scary and threatening. It's actually not, because experience is still experience. So if you see something, say seeing, seeing. If you hear something, say hearing, hearing. It's much more common, I think, for people to interpret these things as being an outside influence. It becomes a paranoia, and I think it actually leads to something that we call schizophrenia. I mean, I think it seems like for some people, schizophrenia is organic in them from an early age, or out of nowhere. For other people, it sounds like they work themselves into this kind of paranoia, and acute hallucination as a result of their reactions. So you want to be mindful of that and try and reverse that sort of trend. But even if someone is organically schizophrenic, like it's just hallucinations that they can't control, and they had no part in cultivating, there still is the capacity to dissociate yourself from them to the extent that you experience them just as experiences. I think it's quite useful, this practice, for someone who is schizophrenic, potentially, because they should be able to see the experiences just as experiences, even the paranoia, even the fear. Just see it for what it is. It's not about trying to prevent yourself from reacting. It's about observing even your reactions, so that you don't react to them, so that it doesn't become a chain reaction. So if you have fear, it's just fear. There's nothing, you don't have to worry about it being usual or unusual. Just say afraid, afraid. And it doesn't matter what you're afraid of. Don't pay any attention to that. The reality has nothing to do with what you're afraid of. It just is an experience of fear. And it doesn't take an object. It's just fear. You just say afraid, afraid. It's triggered by something, but it's independent of whatever it was triggered by. So just note the fear. Say afraid, afraid. And if you're thinking about someone possessing you, just try and note that as thoughts. Don't pay too much attention to these conceptual ideas, because reality is still just experience. If you haven't read our booklet, I can recommend reading that, maybe even doing our at-home course if you haven't done that. I will say this, that it's far less likely for someone to be who is mindful to be possessed, I think. So if your question is that, is meditation going to lead to that? Certain meditations, maybe mindfulness, I think, makes it a lot harder for that to happen. Your mind is just too strong and too clear.
I fear commitments, plans, obligations, and daily meditation schedule. They heavily weigh down on me and make me worried and nervous. I feel I'm not free and often overthink and overeat. Any advice?
So yeah, the obligations, commitments, plans, obligations, and daily meditation schedule don't weigh down on you. It's the fear that weighs down on you, or the disliking, because fear is based on disliking, and worry and anxiety as well contribute. So those are what are weighing down on you. Just try and see them for what they are. Try not to mix them with the actual Well, the actual commitments, plans, obligations, and schedules. Because actually those things don't even exist. They are conceptual tools that we use, but the reality is just experience. So any kind of meditation schedule or commitment or plan of any sort, it's just an idea in the mind. It doesn't have any weight over you. So try and note your reactions to it. That's all. As for overthinking, you have to just be mindful of noting distracted or thinking, overeating. Try and note the desire and the craving for food, the liking of the food, the taste of the food. Just be mindful when you eat.
Is the physical a product of the mental? Should we understand the world in this way?
It seems that the physical can produce mental and the mental can produce physical, and it's not just productive like that, but there are catalysts. I don't know if catalytic is the word, but something that is, what's the word? Is that what catalytic means? That's related to being a catalyst, but there are catalytic relationships in the sense that something doesn't cause something, but it contributes and supports something or inhibits something. So the physical and the mental do have relationships in that way, and it's actually quite complex. There are 24 different types of causality, and they're not A causes B. Some things are associated with other things in complex ways.
Can you please say something about the pattern? Why does it always happen to me? What could be the underlying thoughts and emotions?
Well, I could take a guess, but it's not that useful because it will be a little bit different for everyone. And so what you have to understand is the thought is not the pattern. So the thoughts are the thoughts, but the pattern is most likely some kind of emotional reaction that is perpetuating it. So usually a disliking, because you wouldn't say that. Someone could say that excitedly, happily. Oh, why does this great thing always happen to me? Isn't it incredible? But that's probably not what you're referring to. Most likely there's some kind of negative disliking of sorts. So those kind of things, you can always just boil them down to disliking. Say disliking, disliking. And just note the thoughts as well. Sadness sometimes. Angry.
How does the at-home meditation course work? How long is it? How much time does it require, etc.? What benefit does it have over attending these meditation Q&A sessions?
So the at-home course is nothing like these sessions. And with the at-home course, you practice on your own at home, at least an hour a day. You keep the 5 precepts, and we meet one-on-one once a week, and I give you new exercises. So it's based on the booklet. That's where people start, but the exercises in the booklet are just they should be seen as the first exercise. So we start adding more complexity and additional exercises, both for walking and sitting, just to sharpen the mind and strengthen the mind, and answer your questions, ask you questions, that sort of thing, and lead you through a very traditional course in Satipatthana Vipassana. Not the full course, but almost all of it. And it's a precursor for taking an intensive course in our organization now. We've just found that it's so helpful that we're starting to almost require it, except in exceptional circumstances, just because it makes the process of doing the intensive course so much easier for people if they've done the at-home course first. How long is it? It's about 15 or so weeks, maybe a little more. So again, an hour a day, you're working up to 2 hours a day. The benefit is really night and day. You can get benefit reading our booklet and maybe attending these sessions, but you're still only going to be getting the very, very basic. And you get a lot more if you have a daily regimen of practice and a weekly interview with a teacher to progress through the advanced exercises. It's also free in case anyone is wondering, so you're welcome to sign up. We don't charge money. We're not doing this for money, so don't be worried about that.
Why do I get hooked onto songs and movies? It keeps running in my mind when I meditate. How can I handle this?
Well, the desire. I mean, there's an excitement in the mind, and that stimulates the brain, I guess, which keeps returning the triggers like an echo. But there's a strength to the emotions that imprints it on the brain, I guess, and the brain is involved with re-triggering, and creates the habit in the mind to react in the same way. So seeing that it comes again and again is a part of the understanding of impermanent suffering and non-self, especially non-self, that it's not our minds aren't under our control, that we aren't just deciding to like something or deciding to think about something. The mind has a mind of its own. And so seeing this repetition over and over and over again and out of your control is an important observation in the process of letting go. As a result of seeing that, the mind becomes less clingy and a little bit wary of just diving into addiction and attachment, less inclined towards it after seeing how unwieldy it becomes. So don't try and change it or stop it. Just be mindful of it. Patience is the key word there, because that is an important part of the process. Seeing the repetition of things ad nauseum. The correct response is to be patient with them and to not react to them, and to learn how to be mindful without trying to chase things away or trying to encourage things or discourage things or anything like that.
How much attention should we pay to dreams?
Not very much. I mean, the takeaway from dreams is they provide a glimpse of your unguarded state of mind. So if you're very unmindful, you'll find you have nightmares and very vivid and wild dreams. But as you become more mindful, in the beginning, it can actually increase the craziness of the dreams for a bit as your mind starts to dig stuff up and sort things out and stop repressing things and so on. Stop avoiding things or ignoring them as you start to be more open and receptive. There's in the beginning a bit of an uptick, but over time, people who are mindful dream far, far less and find that their sleep is far more peaceful and healthy. And so dreams are not of any significance, except for showing the state of your mind to some extent. Often your reactions in the dream will show that you still have those emotions, but meditation shows you that a lot better. Mindfulness shows you that a lot more clearly. Dreams can be deceiving. They're not very useful.
Is this technique not too much fixing on single objects?
No, this technique is not about fixing on a single object. That's one key difference between Satipatthana Vipassana and Samatha meditation. In Samatha, you fix on a single object. In Vipassana, Satipatthana Vipassana, your focus is on the momentary objects that arise and cease. So watching the stomach rise and fall is to watch experiences that arise and cease moment after moment. And that's so because that's the difference between reality and concepts. The only way you could focus on a single object is if that object is conceptual, because realities don't last more than moments. And so if you're focusing on something for a long period of time, you have to understand that that focus is conceptual and eventually enters in completely into the realm of what is conceptual and is enabled to see reality directly.
Is living in the streets a good lifestyle for a serious meditator?
It doesn't sound like it. I mean, living in the streets is fraught with all sorts of dangers to the practice. Say living in the forest is a lot better. Living in the streets, there's too many people, too much distraction in the streets, I would say. But there's some nobility to it, the poverty, the giving up of everything, letting go of your own security, the freedom from it. It's not terrible, I guess, if you're very mindful.
My friends suggest it may be good to kill beings, even people, so they move through samsara to a higher form. Won't killing a spider give them a possible chance as a human? How should I respond?
Well, murder isn't the kind of experience that leads one to a pure state of mind. Being murdered. You ever seen in a movie or any depiction of murder where the person says, "Oh, good, I've been murdered. Now I can focus my mind peacefully and move on in a wholesome way." Right? If you kill someone, especially an animal that very, very much doesn't want to die, there's no aspect of that that's going to trigger wholesomeness in the spider or the animal. It's far, far worse. I mean, it's far, far more likely to be the sort of experience that has a negative effect. Some being might have been in their last life as an animal, feeling very. Take dogs for example. Dogs or cats. When we quote unquote put them down, when caretakers murder their animal companions and call it putting them down, you're um, you're putting them through an experience that is highly undesirable and confusing, usually involves things like poison, and it's unnatural. It's not the natural death that they were waiting for. When people die naturally, there's something often, not always, but often magical about it, where they experience a complete state of clarity or a high level of clarity, where it feels like they've just worked everything out, and there's a last moment where there's a resolution. And that kind of death is a very natural death, where it's quite likely that they go on to a good place. But that can only happen through natural causes. If it's unnaturally terminated, there's nothing like that. There's no reason for there to be that moment. There's no resolution, no final karmic, working out your karma so that the last moment you have a clean slate. You have a very unclean slate when you're murdered. You haven't worked, well, not always. You haven't. There's no reason. You haven't worked things out because of being murdered. Like, oh, good, here I'll murder this person, and then they won't have to work out their karma. That's not how it works. You interrupt the process, and so their death is often quite unmindful and defiled and corrupt and clingy and so on, confused, afraid. I mean, it's a silly question, but it's understandable how some kind of logic that's incredibly detached from experience could come up with such an argument. But Even a basic observation of experience will clue you into the fact that that's a very, very dangerous idea, irresponsible and ignorant idea, unrelated to actual reality.
We shouldn't do drugs or drink coffee, but what about sugar? Should I drink only water or also Coca Cola, for example?
Well, coffee isn't such a drug, but it is a drug. It's not a drug in the sense of making you intoxicated, but it is a drug in the sense of providing a stimulation. And I don't get the comparison with sugar that people make, not just you. And it could just be me, but I've never experienced the experience I have from drinking coffee, from having even, well, maybe having incredibly high amounts of sugar, which just poison your bloodstream. If you have an incredible amount of sugar, like just syrup, like that, syrup or some kind of sugar to a very, very high level, then it would mess with you. But just drinking a can of Coke, it's the caffeine in the Coke that has a very immediate and noticeable effects on your energy level. So caffeine is kind of a drug. Sugar, but I wouldn't worry too much about caffeine. So I mean, sugar is something you should worry about because of health much more. I mean, sugar is very bad for the body. In large amounts, it causes a lot of sicknesses. But I wouldn't worry about it from a mental perspective, except in how we like the sweet taste. That's much more dangerous mentally.
Walking is good, thus we do walking meditation to help the body. Why not use other wise health modalities to aid the body to be able to meditate better, longer reaching?
Well, that's a bit of an overstatement as to why we do walking. I mean, we do walking because sitting all the time is unhealthy. So walking is a good balance. That's the main reason I would say that we do walking. That's one of them. Another main reason is because walking does have benefits that sitting doesn't. It sort of breaks up the lethargy, provides a strength of mind that can be very useful as a counterpoint to sitting meditation. Sitting all the time isn't such a good meditation practice either, and not especially in the practice of mindfulness. As far as doing it because it has health benefits, that's really kind of just a side byproduct. It's more that it has health benefits over just sitting all the time. So walking and sitting, is a healthy practice. That's all. We're not really interested in aiding the body to be more healthy, like doing things that are going to improve bodily health. We're not really interested in that. The interest ends more at not doing those things that are going to be excessive detriment to the bodily health, like sitting all the time.
I feel motivated for certain tasks and actions and feel resistance when it comes to others. Any suggestion for how being mindful can help with duties and tasks when I'm unmotivated?
Well, yeah. Again, it's like I said with the other question. You note the resistance. You have to take the resistance as an object of meditation. That's all. It's quite simple. I mean, it's not easy, and it's not just going to fix your problems, but it will make them easier, make them better, lead to more patience. I mean, you get more results, as with everything I say in these sessions. The great results are only going to come from dedication to the practice. So it's not like a magic trick where you say a word like resisting or disliking a couple of times and poof, you're cured. It's a skill that you have to cultivate, but it certainly is the right way and it puts you on the right track to take up the practice of being mindful of these things. You should see a benefit if you dedicate yourself to being more mindful about the resistance.
Do new beings enter samsara, or has there always been an unquantifiable amount of us? Was my being always around, or did I enter into the wheel at some time?
Yeah, I don't answer these sorts of questions. Sorry. Is that it for the meditation questions? All right. Let's just be mindful.
Here's another meditation question.
So the reason for avoiding questions of a certain sort is they're not practical. They don't have any practical application. They don't generally have answers because they tend to have basis in concepts that are outside of reality. So there often isn't even an answer to such questions, just because the very base of the question it rests on assumptions that are invalid, that are conceptual. But mainly because it's just impractical, unhelpful, and not very useful.
I can't focus on my breath as the main meditation object because it makes me more frustrated and it's too subtle. What other object can I use as the main meditation object?
Look, see, that is exactly why you should be focusing on not the breath, but the stomach as your main meditation object, because it will make you frustrated. It won't be as subtle. So I don't know if you read our booklet on how to meditate, but I'd recommend reading that. And instead of focusing on the breath per se, we focus on the reality that is that we call the breath. But the reality is the tension in the body, the stiffness in the stomach, the tension when the stomach rises and the stomach falls. So focusing on that isn't subtle, and so that problem is done away with. Agreed that the breath can be very subtle, but frustration is not a good reason to stop practicing, especially in the practice of mindfulness. Frustration is something that we have to learn about, understand, and let go of, rather than avoid and say, "Oh, well, that frustrates me. I'm going to do something else." The way to cure the frustration is not to avoid the thing that is frustrating you. It is to get a better relationship towards the things that frustrate you, such that you're no longer frustrated by them. That's the solution. So try to be mindful of those things that frustrate you.
I have trouble relaxing. I feel that I am an uptight and rigid person. What meditation can I do to change this?
So I wouldn't recommend trying to change it, because that's what an uptight and rigid person would do. I mean, that's the part of being uptight and rigid, is the need to control, the need to change. Something's wrong, I have to fix it. That kind of attitude is what leads to being uptight and rigid. So the solution is, again, to try and be mindful and have a better relationship with your experiences. Just try and be mindful of being uptight and rigid. Um, Try not to see it as I am this sort of person. Try and see it as moments of experience. So, what is leading to this judgment of yourself as being uptight? Try and note the experiences of stress and worry and so on. Anger, if it's rigidity and that sort of thing, being stubborn. Try and note the experiences. There's no cure to being this sort of person or being that sort of person. Why? Because that is not reality. So you can't cure something that's not real. The reality is the moments of experience, and those can be changed if you have a better habit of how you approach reality. And mindfulness provides that. So I'd recommend reading our booklet if you haven't read the booklet. And if you have, then consider doing the at-home course. It's a good way to start getting into mindfulness.
Is meditation as important as keeping the precepts? Is there a connection between keeping the precepts and meditation?
It's not really that useful to stratify things like that. Like, okay, I can only do one. Today I can only do one. Keep the precepts or practice meditation. So I have to prioritize. That'd be a very bad attitude. They're both necessary, in fact. So as far as stratifying them, I mean, I would say nothing beats meditation, and meditation could be considered more important simply because precepts are just conceptual, and if you're mindful, you do much better than keeping precepts. You're actually inherently ethical. But if you're not keeping the precepts, if you're breaking, say, the 5 precepts, it's going to be very hard for you to be mindful, and very unlikely that you'll ever enter into mindful states. Even enter into states where you want to be mindful. Your mind is just too corrupt. So absolutely, both keep the precepts and practice meditation. And there's your connection. The connection is that the precepts keeping the precepts maintain the stability of the mind. And they describe states. They describe the avoidance of states, of actions that lead to states that are unstable. So absolutely, keeping the precepts is an essential part of a meditation practice. If you want to do the at-home course, you have to keep at least the 5 precepts. That we have that rule for that reason.
I'm mindful when I wake up for about an hour, then I lose that state for the entire day. Can you please advise on what to do?
Well, it might be a little bit of a misperception that you're mindful for an hour. That's not really how mindfulness works. You might be concentrated for an hour when you wake up, and that can often be because you've just woken up. But mindfulness is momentary. So don't be concerned with hours or anything like that. Don't be concerned with states you've lost or gained or that sort of thing. Try and learn to be mindful in moments. If you haven't read our booklet, that might be a good place to start.
I find I am alone in the practice. I think I need a teacher. Should I try the at-home course?
I can't say for you, I can't tell you what you should or shouldn't do. But if you think you're up to it, I think anyone who is able to do the course should do it. You just have to decide whether you're able to. I mean, the commitment is substantial. You have to be doing at least an hour a day. That's like, I mean, that's something like, ideally you do half an hour in the morning and half an hour in the evening, and it's half walking, half sitting. So it means 15 minutes walking, 15 minutes sitting twice a day. It's not a burdensome commitment by any means, but it is a commitment. So if you can do that, I would say, with very few exceptions, I would recommend everyone to do it. I can't think of any exceptions. I just don't want to categorically say everyone, but I think everyone should do it if they can.
I dissociate often due to post-traumatic stress disorder. I've always found meditation challenging because I end up just dissociating during the practice. Any advice?
Well, meditation is challenging, so don't be discouraged by that reality. But you can there's always experiences you can note. Whatever you mean by dissociating, I'm not exactly clear what that experience would be, but you note the experience. And you know what the experience is, because it's not a monolithic thing. Experiences are constantly changing. Try and focus on your stomach. You'll find that triggers often a lot of things surrounding PTSD. So once you're focused on the stomach, you can bit by bit start to apply mindfulness to those things that you avoid, perhaps.
Tomorrow is Buddha's birthday. Thinking about the Buddha at all times keeps my mind at presence instead of wandering to the past or future. Is it okay to think about the Buddha at all times?
Well, it's better than okay. It's a wholesome thing. It probably leads you to be reborn in a peaceful, happy place, but it's not the path that leads to freedom from suffering. So it's not what the Buddha would advise you to do. The Buddha said you could follow me along and hold on to my robe, and you'd never become enlightened. The Buddha is not the goal. There was once a monk who ordained. He was a lay person, and he thought to himself, "Oh, I don't have enough time to see the Buddha," so he ordained just so he could see the Buddha all the time, and he would just sit there and look at the Buddha and smile, and he's so happy. And the Buddha told him to get lost. Apehi, he said, "Go away. Why are you following around this disgusting, filthy toilet of a body?" And he went off to practice. And the Buddha said, "Who sees the Dhamma sees me." So the Buddha wanted us to see the Dhamma. That was his instruction to this monk. So what is the Dhamma? The Dhamma is reality. So by seeing reality, you become very much in tune with the Buddha, and you could be considered to be seeing the Buddha or being with the Buddha at all times. That's why we teach people to focus on reality. That's why the Buddha taught that, why he was always talking about experience, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, feeling, thinking. The 5 aggregates over and over again, the 4 satipatthana, it's all about experience. So by focusing on experience, you learn about experience. And by learning about experience, you understand the truth of the Buddha's teaching. And by seeing the truth of the Buddha's teaching, you become very close with the Buddha. You become, you could say, one with the Buddha in some way.
Thank you, Bhante. We've crossed the hour. That's all the questions we're prepared to ask today.
Okay, thank you all for your questions. Thank you, Chris and Jim, for your help. Have a good week, everyone. I wish you all peace, happiness, and freedom from suffering. Sadhu.
Sadhu.